Nice to see you, Margaret, and feel virtually at least connected to Bradford. I visited Bradford when I was studying design in Leeds, probably 20 years ago. Uh, I think you recently had a museum there open, so I had interest in seeing the exhibition. And it's such a pleasure actually to have studied in that area because I'm connecting today from Cambridge. This is where I'm from, and it felt very important to be connected to the north of this country and see different perspectives. So perhaps there's a thread there of interest. So yeah, I will just want to share with you today my journey in this subject, and it might inspire you. And I look forward to hearing your thoughts and your comments on it, and see if it resonates with you. It might be nice if you're happy to start with a moment of reflection on what the power of perspective means to you. What comes to your mind, and what is the perspective that I want to have? And so, just for a few moments to create some awareness, and we'll continue. So it'd be nice to reflect back after some sharing what your view is on this subject. And I'm a very visual person. Background is in, as was mentioned, I always enjoyed art, but design. So I'm going to share some pictures, but they're more to stimulate thought and discussion. So hopefully, if the technology works, then you'll see on your screen the slides. And so I wanted to start with reflecting on our own perspective in a very simple way. And this is a picture of an exhibition at the Hayward Gallery in London. And it's a light artist, and his name was Dan Flavin. And he created color fields in this large gallery space. And as you can see, just extremely simple. You might not really think this is art, and that's a definite perspective. It's a very abstract. But what I found interesting is you enter these spaces and you shift your experience as you go through. So say you were in the room which was flooded with the yellow light, and that's like absorbing your vision. And then you walk into this room which is flooded in red. But actually when you enter that space, it doesn't look red. It actually looks orange because it's like you're as if coming from um, a filter, because your eyes are used to yellow and then you see this as orange, and then maybe 10 seconds later you realize, oh, it's not orange, it's red. Your eyes adjust to this space, and then you might go to this room, and what color would you feel that you would see it as? You might not see it as blue, right? You would get a feeling that it is purple. So after 10 seconds, you realize it's not, it's actually blue. And at the time, I thought it was such a simple statement, but quite profound, that when we move into spaces, are we seeing them as they really are, or are we colored by the previous space or experience? It kind of triggered some thoughts. And it leads to a very succinct quote, so I thought I would share it with you. So we look at the world with our colored glasses. And through our glasses, we look at the world based on the color of these glasses. And that's a philosopher named Kant. So, what do you think are our colored glasses that we have when we see this world? Feel free if you want to type your thoughts anytime. I can see the chat as well. Yeah, we definitely have a bias. So the bias would be sort of many different things, I think. Like, I'm from Cambridge and I come up and study in Leeds. It's like there's a certain perspective I have, coming from a different part of the UK even. Maybe the way we see the world based upon what our parents have told us or our culture has said is good, bad, valuable, not valuable. Yes, and as you say, that is informing our beliefs, like what we want to fight for, what we want to cherish. Viewpoints. It could be the educational background, our gender. So I'm going to sort of, and this maybe determines whether we act from fear or not. That's true. So let's explore these a little bit more. One thing which affects our perspective, I would suggest, are our experiences in the past. So I'll give you one simple example. This is a picture of the breed of dog that I had when I was growing up, Airedale Terrier, as it happens, if you are into dogs. And when I see a picture like this, I feel happy because I remember when we would take her to the coast, and she would run around and go a little bit loopy actually, and I just remember it being great fun. But if you have had an experience of being bitten by a large dog, then you see that picture and you think, oh, you might feel fearful, as you mentioned, or dislike. You might think, oh, why do people have dogs? It's strange, you have a different view. And neither is right or wrong as such. It's just our experiences have colored our perception. Would you agree? So it's like coming up as being triggered by something, and it's based on our previous association or experience. So yeah, it's good to be aware of. Then we become more empowered. So how much our experiences are impacting the way we see. So another example of the way we see can be defined by our role that we're playing or our job. So one example, during the last part of my working in design, our client was Next. So we would meet them on site in the shops, and we would be meeting with a team of people, each with a very different role. So you might have the painting contractor, the main shop fitters, the merchandising team who are, very skilled these days, know exactly what to put where, and they are thinking, and each one of us are looking at the same thing from a completely unique perspective. And I was there as the designer person, and we have to have a conversation and we have to relate to each other, but we all have our own agenda and our own value system of what is important. Someone is solely thinking about budget, someone else is thinking about mostly thinking about budget actually, but we were not thinking about the budget so much as the overall design quality, but how much things will sell, where they should be placed. And that is good to be aware of and sympathetic about, I think, when we are all coming. And sometimes we shift perspectives from one role to another. If we're working and you're the boss, and then you come home and you meet your family, then you've gone from the perspective of the boss to the perspective of the partner or the parent, and they require totally different responses. And sometimes we can get stuck in one perspective and not realize that it's not appropriate. So see if you have any examples or experiences. But it's affecting the way we see. So just sharing really at the beginning some examples to sort of stimulate on this topic. And this is a picture taken from a school in north of Vietnam in the city of Hanoi, which is where, as was mentioned, I came across the ideas as taught by Brahma Kumaris in Southeast Asia. I think I needed to be somehow exposed to a different culture for some reason. And I valued every second actually. It was so useful to see another view. And I was teaching English in this school. And in the morning, every morning, the children would line up in these regimented lines and do exercises. Quite common, I think, in this part of the world. And to me, as the Westerner, it appeared to be like army style, so strict, and couldn't imagine how they would implement that when I was at school in that way. But for them, it's like they feel there's a certain easiness with this kind of very, very regimented style. It's sort of a different psychology. And it opened my mind to how we see so differently in different cultures. Like the perspective of beauty is so different. In some places to be large in size is seen as beautiful, in other places to be like too thin, or maybe it's almost like not healthy, that's seen as beautiful. It happened in Vietnam because of the recent history of poverty. They've gone the other way now, and there is prosperity relatively. Some children would be quite large in size and they would say strong, this child is strong. But in the West, we might say they may be a little bit chubby, overweight. Perspectives on death and perspectives on marriage and all sorts of things. It helps you to be, I think, objective about the culture you've come from when you meet someone from another culture. You don't have to live somewhere else, but that's why it's so rich to be in a multicultural place, I think, because at least there's more chance to be more open and learn. Another example, and this picture of a train is to remind me of a real story of a man traveling on a train, and I'm not sure where he's going, but let's say it was London to Cambridge, and he was with his 3 quite young children, and for the entire first half hour, the children were kind of running up and down and shouting, being noisy, playing with each other, but creating this enormous disturbance on this otherwise super quiet, typically British train carriage. And everyone was tolerating it, but at some point, one lady decided to say something. She's like, can't manage another half an hour of this. So she speaks to the father and just says gently, but sort of sweetly, I'm really, really sorry, but would you mind controlling your children or saying something, because just creating this disturbance for everyone. And the father, who looked pretty tired, and he was apologetic, but he just said, yeah, I realize, sorry, I'm really sorry, but we've just found out that their mother's been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and we're just coming back from the hospital. So he was sort of somehow not completely acting in the normal everyday way. And everyone on the carriage heard, and we just perspective shifted. You could feel it on the carriage. And after that, there was definitely a shift of atmosphere. There was no irritation anymore. In fact, people were helping the children, playing with them, creating a friendly atmosphere. So it's very interesting to think about how information helps to shift perspective. No one told them how they should feel, but just information of understanding, they adjusted, and it was very natural to tolerate and to make the most of that rest of the journey. So I think this is useful and quite empowering as well, the power of knowledge. Not sure what this, a quite interesting and extreme view, but not uncommon in the scientific community. The late Stephen Hawkins, which incidentally you do used to see in Cambridge. I saw him in a shoe shop once, buying a pair of shoes in Clark's, so he would be around. Passed on, I think, a couple of years ago now. So he had this view quite strongly that we need to find another planet. And that's a perspective, which is a curious one. And I know other scientists also say we need to explore, because understanding the way population's increasing and the environment. But it'd be interesting, how do you feel about that? And what perspective is it that, how is that sustainable? So for example, if we've created whatever we have in this world, will it be solved by moving to another planet, for example? So it's interesting how different communities create their own view on the solutions and how to fix the problems of the world. I sort of resonate more with the grandmother's logic that maybe we need to fix this one first. So that is a view. I put this in as a snapshot of technology and how it affects our experience of our world. And it's actually depicting what may happen in the near future with mixed reality games technologies. This is the boy is seeing through maybe virtual glasses, or he's seeing a fish in the room. That's what this mixed reality is, artistic impression. And if you've ever tried virtual reality, I have, and it's quite incredible. You can be in your room, but you can put on this headset and be in an entirely different world. And it changes your view of space, I think. And just even our mobile phones, you can walk along and someone can be literally as if not there, because they're completely in their own communication bubble. And it's good to be aware of how that does impact our mind and our experience of the world. Are we alienating ourselves sometimes? And that we have perhaps more responsibility to look after our own health, because it does have an impact, and what we see, and maybe to take a bit of care about these things as well, how we use technology. So now it kind of begs the question, we've got these options. Is there a helpful perspective and way to see the world and ourselves? I mean, there are many perspectives. but is there one which we could say is the best or the right one? You can see in the chat a place of gratitude rather than a place of greed. Yes, that's useful. And spiritual perspective, someone's typed. So one thought on this, you might know this person or recognize them. This is the late Superman. And he said something I thought was quite interesting. And his name was Christopher Reeve. That pain is inevitable, but misery is a choice. And it feels like helpful because, yes, we know that that things happen, but we have choice about how we experience it. I think is a very empowering perspective, at least plants a seed of that thought of freedom. So it can be, and that's how he said he managed his it's chronic pain that he had for many years, and he lived on much longer than the doctors predicted with the support of his partner, who was helping him on probably an emotional level as well as physical level. And so quite profound realizations he had through the experience of pain and how to manage that. So yes, it's a useful and quite a powerful way of dealing with some situations. So this is physical, but what about emotional? And so we can smile because children can't hide their feelings, which is a very beautiful thing. But written over the face, something has gone wrong. And adults just get better at hiding it, I think. So she's actually suffering. So something has got pain, but it's emotional pain. So again, is there something like I can do to shift my perspective to help? So we had the example of the physical pain, and we can use a strategy to help ourselves manage it. What about, can we do the same thing with emotional pain? So when I came to these ideas and interest in meditation, I was working in London and in the field of design. And I really felt that my life was about creating harmony with all of these things which are drawn symbolically. So starting on the left, it's the relationships, friendships, partner in my life. Then it was the bank balance. It was thought a lot about money when working in London because it's so expensive. Then it's the job, symbolized as the briefcase. Then the mortgage and the possessions. It was like I was going around and around in my mind between these things, and good quality of life meant when they're all going well. And that was about the best I could really manage. And I thought that was normal. I never questioned it really. But it did leave a question mark actually, even though I never really analyzed it because I didn't really have the language to or the structure. But the quality of life inside was very much in question because something always seemed to be going on with one of those things. You know, something needed to be sorted out with the flat or with the relationship or something at work. And even when things were going well, the thought at the back of my mind was it might not last, So that perspective left a little strain, I would say, in the emotional inner life. And so it was fine, but I was getting a little bit more responsibility at work, which you might think great, but it created a little bit more stress as well, more like a feeling of expectation. And also, of course, there's a perpetual fear of losing one's work. And I decided that I want to find some stability that can carry me through uncertainty. And it was like a deep wish, really, that was coming more and more. And when I discovered meditation, actually, I was working in London and the meditation centre was near Arsenal football ground, so we can hear them announcing the players. So that was curious. But once you manage to calm down and not get distracted by that, I discovered something that for me personally was profound, and it shifted my perspective. What do you think you can see in this picture? Is there something hidden? I think it's quite badly hidden, so you probably can tell what it is. But the reason why I'm showing it is, yes, something below the surface. The picture that's hidden behind, any ideas? Yes, it is quite easy to guess. So it's a tree. And I used to feel that my mind was like throwing up lots of different thoughts and I couldn't connect them. It was a bit like my mind was a bit random with this thought here, a bit like the top of a tree. If you've ever seen a tree in flood, then you only know what it is from your experience in the past. But when you look at it, could be a bush, it could be just some random twigs. And at a sort of psychological level, it felt like that inside, that I was this random collection of this branch here, one branch there, but I couldn't connect anything. And that was the best way I could see retrospectively how to explain how I felt. But in this experience of meditation, it may have been a few seconds even, but it was like the water had gone down and I saw the tree, if you like. And what I mean by that is that the essence of myself is together. It's like there is a core, and this core is peace. It was so simple, but so grounding. It was like everything that's going on in my life, like the branches, but they all, beneath and behind all of that, there is this self. And when I'm experiencing it, nothing else actually matters. That was the feeling. It was so helpful. It was like a reference point that I knew now deep inside that whatever happens, this is who I actually am, and nothing and no one can change it. And even if I forget it, it's still there. It was something that I couldn't explain at all to anyone at the time. But I can see very clearly now it shifted my perspective and my priorities from that moment, because some degree of worry just dropped. There's still many things to do and to deal with internally, but there was some degree of security in knowing and feeling that. And at the time when I went home and I spoke to my partner at the time, I just couldn't even begin to explain. I couldn't articulate how profound and helpful it was to have had this. And life changed a lot for me the year after that. And I think this can happen when we have realizations in life. Whether whether we think we're in control of it or not, it will change in a very positive way if it is about self-realization. So the image of a tree helped me. So yeah, I think we all experience meditation differently. Not everyone gets like this, but at the same time, even just a glimpse, and it may even been a glimpse, but they're very powerful. And when you think about it, if we really analyze it, sometimes a glimpse will shift our perspective in a subtle way and send us in a different trajectory. So I was searching, if you like, for this understanding. I had some sort of experience, but old habits die hard, and worry about things and wanting things to be fixed externally for me to experience this emotional freedom and stability was not just like click. No, it needed work, and I wanted to grasp it, understand it. So it became a bigger interest, and that's what I feel what I was looking for all the time in design, because I always felt people make a place. It's not really about the color of the walls and the quality of the fittings. Nothing wrong with wanting beautiful spaces, but on a practical level, I think we often go to a place for the atmosphere created by people rather than the smartness of the decor. Don't know if you would agree with that. So that was what I was looking for. What is this inner space? What's going on? And that's when I just started to explore a little bit more. Someone's discovered the drawing tool. That looks fun. So yeah, I came to the center of the Brahma Kumaris was in Phnom Penh, and it was information that was shared with me, and I remember the feeling that it was just shared that in our true state, when we're feeling ourselves, we are actually have a core base experience of peace and joy and love and wisdom and power. And these were just words in a sense, but it's something helped. It sort of consolidated something for me, and it made sense intuitively, because before I was operating from outside in, thinking I really need this to be right, and then I'll feel peace of mind. But actually, as we all know, it kind of leaves us vulnerable. But to turn it around, that was profound for me, and it just felt right that we have a reference point for peace, wisdom, and love, because it's something that is in us, that is our nature. As a premise, it shifted my perspective. It planted a seed of thought that allowed me to let go of wanting to feel completed by someone or something outside. And that was really important for me at the time, because I was looking for tracing my past. I was looking for finding my roots, and it kind of allowed me gradually to kind of be at a deeper peace and realize that there's a lot to discover within the self. And after that, I'm free to contribute and do everything outside, but I don't need to do it from this victim mindset that I need someone else to experience love and peace and wisdom. So I hope it's making sense. Hope you're following. And I've just found the clear tool, just in case you're distracted. Yeah, so this was very helpful for me. And as I say, it was just information, but just like we mentioned before with the man on the train, with the children, it was just information that the passengers heard, but it shifted something. And so it's nice to acknowledge that power. So later I came across what I felt was consolidating something that I'd experienced whilst in the Far East, and it was Cambodia. And I feel immensely grateful for having that opportunity to be there, because it was like being in a space of learning. But I knew I needed to come back to base. So I came back to my hometown in Cambridge and continued my understanding and discovery of this subject. And also the cliche that one is, running away from something, and it was completely true. I probably was. And funnily enough, although I'd gone to another continent, it was probably because of attachment, but I'd kind of gone the other way. Because if we haven't created or connected to our core experience of peace and self as being love for, I think our relationships can get quite complicated, and that's something I'm saying from my own experience. So being able to come back was with a different perspective completely. It was much more understanding of myself and therefore of others, and people who would have triggered certain feelings before. I was able to understand them a bit more because I was starting to understand myself. And most importantly, I stopped blaming other people for how I felt, because I realized I'd created a comfortable external world when I was abroad. I couldn't blame anyone anymore. I couldn't blame the city or the busy work life or the conditioning which we don't realize we've taken on from society about who we should be, and that we should have to have family, or we sometimes don't realize perhaps how much is there. But I couldn't blame anyone because I was starting to not feel that security in me, and I realized I need to take responsibility for that, and it's in my power. So I was much more, I guess, mature. So coming back, it was with a lot more understanding, and realized that I definitely can't blame people for how I felt. So perspective had changed a lot. And so this further understanding, which is like a map, which is often drawn in the center here in Cambridge, is to see those things, those elements that we had earlier, but inside a box, which depicts the physical world, in an effort to be able to see objectively, to be able to have a perspective of power and see, can I see more clearly without being clouded by emotions what's really happening. So everything is in this box, in this model, including the Far East and including the Far West, and people, jobs. And this perspective, this model, was emphasizing that we can see all the world as a stage. And one way, one property, if you like, of this world, although you might like to suggest how we can define this world, but one word might be that it's always changing. I think it was Bob Dylan that said, nothing as stable as change. And nothing wrong with that, otherwise we'd get bored. But sometimes I think we have an ambivalent attitude to change because it's not in our control. And with change comes end, and we don't know how it will change. Just take 2020, who had predicted, apart from Bill Gates, And so, of course, if I have created like a dependency for my peace on the things outside in this world, then I will feel insecure. I don't need to feel guilty about that. It's just good to know that that emotional reaction will come if I'm needing something to be different, if I've created dependency in this world. And so what I learned is that we have an option, and the perspective of being an observer. What does that mean? It's like you are fully in your work environment or with your family, but you have an option to see it objectively. So we do it naturally with our friends. So for example, if you have a close friend with some situation, they're trying to understand what to do, you're quite objective and you can give them quite useful impartial advice because you're not emotionally caught up. And your advice can often be very, very insightful. And what we can do with meditation, we can train that in ourselves for ourselves. And it doesn't mean in the middle of a situation we try and do it, of course, when we can create a minute or two, but to take a step back and see this world as if from a higher space. And the box is good because you can see the box is quite small for a minute or two. And just give yourself a mind holiday from needing to think about it just for a minute even. And nothing will stop. Just like if you have a nap for a few minutes, everything is still going on. But you give yourself another set of feelings where your emotions are not dictated by and determined by what's going on. And you are experiencing yourself as being independent, and that's so freeing. This is so helpful. Take for example, if you're with children and they're totally intensely playing in a doll's house, you can, if you want, you can be with them and then play the game with them. They might want you to look at something, so you're present completely, but you're also aware of a lot more. You are aware of what's cooking in the kitchen and where you need to be later. The children might not be thinking about that. So you're able to pull back and not get lost in the emotions of the drama in the doll's house. That feeling, it's a little bit like that, but we can train ourselves. And this creates another set of feelings that we had earlier, that security, emotional freedom, actually is a core to feeling peace, because when I feel secure that whatever happens in this small doll's house doesn't affect the way that I feel and the way that I am. And the joy is there. It doesn't depend on what's happening or not happening. You're free to love when you feel secure. And that is like a natural response. It's a bit like if an animal is cornered, then they will feel insecure and they will act in fear. But if the animal is secure, then they want to love you and they want to play. And this security, this inner stability allows us to concentrate. It's not that I become kind of floaty and sort of irresponsible. Actually, we can contribute more clearly with a presence of mind, with concentration. And students say they're able to concentrate better and perform better when they are allowing themselves to take a step back. And it's actually a contribution to your environment. So is it possible to be in this world and not get into the emotions, the insecure emotions? I think, for example, insecurity brings stress. If I'm not sure whether I will be secure, I have uncertainty, then I get stress. Or something happens where I can't secure myself and I blame someone. It's exhibiting as anger, or I blame myself and I feel sad. Or someone else gets something that I wanted to be more secure, and like my job, for example, and the difficult feeling of jealousy and envy. So is it possible to fulfill all our responsibilities that we need to do with our homes and family and mortgage, and not get into the attachment and thereby get into the mindset of insecurity? Is it possible? Is there a perspective that helps with this? Is it possible to be in this world and not get into those difficult feelings? So yeah, one comment is maybe possible but seems hard. Yeah, that often is a comment. And one way of making it easy is we can kind of make it on a smaller scale. So in Cambridge, we have a museum, Fitzwilliam, but say we're talking about Bradford, so you've got your National Museum, Science Museum, I think. So say the museum in Bradford, we decide, right, lockdown is finished at some point, and we meet there. And we say a couple of hours, we allow ourselves to have a little look round. And so we go in and we are enjoying all this range of what's available in there, all the exhibits, but we don't create any attachment, right? In those 2 hours, we might even have a coffee and meet people, but we know we have an exit and we know we have something more to do later. So that 2 hours becomes enjoyable and we haven't gotten into any of these complicated feelings. So how did we manage that? We did it in the museum in Bradford for 2 hours. So what was the secret? We must have had some insight. So one word which is a fascinating word when it comes to perspective is the perspective of a guest, because we knew we were there for 2 hours. So it's like you have the mindset of knowing the exit really clearly, but appreciating, and that word gratitude, right, that comes with a guest. So are we guests here in this world? Are we guests on this planet? And unless you have plans, and I don't think at any university they've got any plans like that. I think they've got plans to live a bit longer, but if we're not making those plans, we are definitely guests. And this perspective, I feel, is very profound and empowering for our emotional inner landscape, because it's like a simple reminder and a bit like a reset button that yes, we are involved with everything, but to remain internally free and remain light, because guests are always traveling light. Most guests, some say take the kitchen sink, but mindset is of passing through, and as a consequence, the perspective of a guest has gratitude within it. and not really wishing to take the place with them. Acceptance, less expectations. And in all cultures, there's a reference point for welcoming guests. As a traveler really can see, especially in India, is like the most, they absolutely treat guests like deities almost. And perhaps because guests bring newness and they help everyone else to get into that mindset of appreciation. They bring with them a fresh perspective, new energy, lightness, and it's contagious. I've really noticed in this lockdown period that because we're hardly seeing people at all, but when there is a guest, you might have one person that comes, maybe you meet them in the garden, but it's so refreshing because you hardly see new people, but it almost feels like you've been away if you get that feeling, but just someone, a new face and a new view, it's like a lovely feeling. And so if we just tap into that, actually it's very, very empowering and liberating, because that actually reminds us of something that a guest is ultimately has a journey, and it becomes a reason and a source of the meditation that is practiced as well, to linger on the thoughts and allow or observe those feelings of freedom. And one quote, I think Steve Jobs, when he was meeting Harvard University students, you probably heard this before, but he picked something up during his period of exploration in India. And I think the ashram he went to is become a bit famous now for celebrities, but just a simple thing that he shared, that he would treat each day as if it was his last, as a exercise in bringing clarity to his mind and to his life and perspective. And he attributes this one practice to his creative success, because he has creativity, but often we can get cluttered, and how to prioritize, how to know what the right thing is. If we kind of bring that energy, it kind of allows us to focus on what is important, and that how he would refine his work. He would do the brainstorm and then narrow it down and narrow it down until there was just the essence of what really mattered. And I think when we sort of see like that, a lot of the things that are on our minds really are quite they're not significant in the bigger picture, and that can be cyclical thinking on all kinds. But when we narrow it down and see from this broader view, it becomes more natural not to sweat the small stuff. It's a bit like benefit of hindsight, or how we see when we look back at the past, we think, why was I worried about that? It's like we can get caught up. The bigger picture is a bit like taking a step back. Even the feeling we get when we step back in time, it's like getting the broader map will only be beneficial. Someone's saying, if you treat each day as if it was his last, if not get anything done. It's a good point. I think we need to balance one attitude which comes, and the final word, or one word, is trustee, because as a guest we don't become careless. We actually look after things. If we were in the museum in Bradford and someone tried to break the chair, you probably really naturally want to do what you could to prevent that happening. So we naturally want to look after things. But the balance of the perspective of seeing this as a bit of a play helps, that when we're playing, we are light, because it's like we feel that it doesn't really matter. You know, if like say, okay, Margaret says we've got extra 10 minutes, and we say, okay, sure. So there's 40 of us here. Let's play a game. We have like 2 rooms, 20 and 20. We're going to play a game. And that shifts your perspective, because the energy of play can bring out the best in you. It's not a labor. You might fight. You might kind of work really, really hard to win. But whilst you're wanting to achieve things and do your best, at the same time, you are light, because you know it's just a game. It's like backdrop is of being carefree. So in the same way, it's this balance that comes, that we have the option to nurture this backdrop of lightness and feeling carefree. The baseline is that we can experience this peace, and that is our nature. But from that space, from that security, we can come in and be in the mindset of play. And that's when we want to do our best from enthusiasm and happiness, not from the stress of forcing ourselves to do things from insecurity. So I hope that helps. And I know we've kind of come to time, more or less. So be interesting to see if you have any questions. I can see some comments. I wanted to share one final slide here, and that is some practical tips, because it's so helpful. Like right now, we have the support of the company of each other that are feeling this is important. And I think this energy is so nourishing in our own homes. But to create some structure, to start to become aware of our perspective. And I feel that having time to meditate in the morning is like become just like brushing the teeth. It's a routine, but so helpful and essential to come back to something which is more important than the roles we play, and that is that core sense of the self, of being peaceful. As we looked at the picture of the tree, it's like coming to the trunk of the true self. And you can use music or commentary or your own reflections, but even if it's a few minutes, it's really setting the scene for the day. I remember when I was really new to these ideas, I was teaching English to teenagers in the Far East, and they were all teenage boys somehow in this class, and I found it challenging, but they were very sweet, but they just had this extraordinary energy. So I noticed a huge shift in my perspective when I started this routine of meditating, because that day when I saw them, I had created something inside which was stable, so I was more able to see what they really needed, rather than me approach it from my insecure feelings of trying to control things. And I just allowed some degree of freedom at the beginning. And I felt they respected me more, because I wasn't trying to be too heavy on them. But at the right time, it was possible to rein it in and begin the class. So it's so fascinating how even a few minutes in the morning brings a presence of mind to actually meet others and respond to what the need is, rather than try to control the situation and other people. I never would have thought that would have happened from a few minutes of meditation in the morning. the other thing is, if you are in the habit of writing, then you might find it helpful to keep a diary or a meditation diary of your insights, and even a structure if you want during the day. And in the evening, you can write out what your reflections were, your emotional experiences. But what I felt as a realization about this was, having made effort in the morning, I could see how it was making me more emotionally stable. And I wouldn't have seen that had I not kept track through some kind of diary. And to keep track of how much one has been sleeping is good, because it can and definitely affect what's happening in the mind. And if any of the sketches were helpful, that is useful as something that reminds us of this perspective, that just a simple image of seeing this world in the form of that image of a box, and that everything is there, we are guests. Nothing outside will remind us of this. And if we have the option to bring that to our minds, then it will create that shift of awareness when you look at it. Some of you, if you're already exposed to Brahma Kumaris, might be aware of this traffic control, but if you want to create a hobby out of it, on your phone you can make a little beep, but it just helps us raise awareness on that hour maybe of where our perspective is, and just become more conscious. You could even create a minute of meditation, but make it fun and an opportunity to become more aware. And this one is a bit radical, the last point, to watch less or stop watching TV. Of course, some people are going to be watching this on YouTube, but YouTube can be helpful, but at least it's just a point that we can be quite influenced by the perspective of the one who is directing any program, and it's in cultural context as well. If we want to really go to the depth of our perspective and how we see, we need a little time for that. And to give ourselves the best chance, we can choose more carefully perhaps what we're letting in terms of influences. And then we'll start to value our own inner world, and we might not need to feel so stimulated by the outside as we become more acquainted with what is rich and available within the self. So I'll stop there, and thank you for your comments, and going to see if Margaret would like to. I think at this point we have questions. One point here that I can see was, would you say your first experience of meditation was a direction from God towards that experience? It may have been, but at the time I didn't have a feeling for or a real wish for God, actually, I will be honest. And that word I didn't really resonate with, and I have a different understanding now, but my only experience was of the perspective from religion, and I didn't have a feeling for it. It is understood now as a spiritual, personal spiritual connection, at the level where when we see ourselves as guests, we are even guest in this body, and that this true self is that the core self. And at that level, yes, there is a connection. And I do feel I was guided, and I think maybe we all have some experience of this in our lives. And the more we can consider that as something which is a profound thing for each one of us, and context may be when we understand more clearly what is unhelpful perspective, and that the supreme friend would be to help me to guide towards what is a deep truth and a helpful perspective. I don't know if that really answers your question. Do you miss your old life at all? It's a funny question. I think some people who are coming to a different way of seeing the world don't change anything outside, but I happen to have changed things, and that was part of some kind of journey. But I think we go through some phases where we really question who we are, and I think externally we may look the same, but internally we just are getting rid of clutter, actually. And relationships, job can be the same, but it's the waste and the clutter that is being removed. And we think sometimes we can change things superficially, which is certainly what I was doing. You can change the job, you change the partner, change the city, but until we change something inside, it's I'm not really addressing the true shift of perspective. But I think when we're more aligned with our own truth, we can be clearer in our conscience. So I feel I don't miss anything. If that helps. One comment: each person is right in their perspective. Yes. I think one word maybe is we'd like a perspective that helps me see clearly. So someone can feel that they really, really own. For example, they might feel that they own someone, and that may be their perspective. But if I have that and I hold that, at some point I may be deceived, and I will feel a loss and loss of identity. And so as long as my perspective is in line with truth, then we are more stable. Just looking at the chat here. Someone said you can be either right or happy, but you can't be both. How can I find a balance when facing challenging people? It's a perspective I'm trying to understand. Do I need to think of myself as a guest? I wouldn't agree that you either be right or happy. I think it's better when we realize that we don't need to depend on others for how we feel. And often, if we're looking for security in this insecure box, our dependency on others to make us feel secure based on their opinion of us is quite strong. And it's, I don't need to create anything complicated there, but just to observe. But if I replace it with something higher, like a belonging and a respect at a different level, that we are all fellow guests and travelers here and all have their unique journey, and then that becomes more important. So whether or not people agree with me or want to hear what I have to say here becomes less important. And then others being challenging doesn't affect my feelings as much. In fact, my perspective may be more about how to help rather than wanting them to change to make me feel differently, because others are also going on their journey, and realize that their emotional response is due to their insecurity. It helps me feel a little bit more merciful. but holding on to this vision of others as being at their core this peaceful and stable love for fellow traveler, but they may not be conscious of it. It's very stabilizing. When I was abroad, and there was a friend of mine from another place in the UK, and we were very close friends, but it was quite challenging to be away from your culture, and there could be situations, but you end up kind of looking after each other sometimes. I remember this time she was going through a lot of emotional challenges, and I found the image of seeing as if her true self was like a diamond, like beautiful and clean, but around this diamond were like this big emotions, like clouds, and I could sense if I were to as if try to fix that, it was as if holding her to that emotion and making it worse, as if reinforcing it in her, that present challenge and that emotion. So I think sometimes the best thing is silence, and that deep respect and vision on her is that really, really, as I knew her to be, very special and like this diamond. And things would sort of calm down over some time, maybe, but it helped me to keep my vision on that. And that was stabilizing, and the perspective which carried me through all these different situations and interactions. I don't know if that helps, John. I don't know if you have any comments on this. Yeah, nicely summarized, more succinct than I. To see everyone as beautiful souls is healing for the person in the world. The word soul I've avoided, actually, maybe because in Cambridge there's such an influence of science everywhere, and we are talking about soul, but the word is sometimes quite challenging for people because it might be connotation of religion. But one helpful perspective is you could say we can't prove that there is a soul, but we can't disprove it either. And whilst we don't have the absolute proof either way, I can experiment with this model that there is a soul, and this is who I am, and that this is the guest in this world is like a being of pure, perfect, brilliant, peaceful presence and light, and experiment with it and see how it makes me feel, and the proof will be my own experience. I might share like one story before maybe we have some meditation, but it's a story of perspective relating to an eagle, and this an eagle egg was found by a farmer in a field, and he was walking with his dog, and he saw this egg, and he thought it's not going to survive, so he put it in with the chickens in the chicken coop, and forgot about it really. So after some time, this egg hatched. The egg of the eagle hatched with the chickens. And just as we see in nature, often the rear of another, a young, is raised and reared. So it was raised as a chicken, and this eagle became like a chicken, and it behaved like scratched around and went into the coop at night and into the hut. And life just was like that for day and night and weeks. But in this story, one day, this eagle looks into the sky and he sees another eagle, and this shifted something in him. It was like he saw something new and a perspective of flying. And he actually felt a sadness because he saw something so incredible. But then he looked around and he saw this chicken, like, okay. So another chicken said to him, "Ah, that's an eagle," explained what it was and said, "But we're chickens," and brought him back down to earth. Okay. So he was, okay. carried on being a chicken. But he felt a little sad. So in this version of the story, in this chicken coop, there's a chicken therapist. And the chicken therapist said, okay, come. What seems to be the problem? And puts down his glasses. And so this eagle, who thought is a chicken, lay on the couch and just shared his feelings. And chicken therapist said, interesting. And looked at him and said, I'm not sure, but it could be that you're an eagle, but it's just a feeling. So question would be now, what would you do? What advice would you give to this eagle? Any tips? He's got some information, not completely sure, possibly could be an eagle. Yeah, exactly, Vanessa's. So be the eagle, and how to be the eagle, start using the wings. It's like just use them, just to try it, to start and discover the eagle for yourself. He needs to discover the eagle for himself, not check with another chicken and then go into some circle. So I think this is really profound because we mentioned the word soul, whether we have a feeling for it, but to discover that what that means. It's like there is a different dimension than behind this box, and there is a security and peace that is deeply known, that this physical world doesn't promise. And that perspective is very, very liberating because there is independence. And freedom was a big word for me. So later on, more maybe in truth, but freedom, and freedom to fly. And that perspective which affords that emotional freedom and truth. Yeah, you can call the eagle Eddie, why not? So I might hand over to the team, and thanks so much for this opportunity. It's been very, very connecting and enjoying